Hello and welcome to Here to Strive. My name is Nicolas and I'll be your instructor in this series of courses about Jira software and Jira Work Management. Now, if you're not familiar with Jira, let me summarize it for you. Jira is a software developed by Atlassian and it's mostly used by project managers since it contains a variety of features that makes keeping track of projects and tasks way much easier. Now, Jira is a software as a service. It's a cloud software. They previously had a self-hosted or data center edition, but I'm afraid that has been discontinued. So we'll have to stick to the cloud subscription-based model that they offer. So as you can see up here in my profile, which by the way is a free profile, completely free, no trial, it's free forever. We can see that we have two different tools, Jira Software, like I mentioned, and Jira Work Management. Now, what's the difference between them? It can get a bit confusing because there are two different products that are related to each other in a way because, their main purpose is the same to make life easier and more organized when it comes to managing tasks and projects. Jira software is widely used by developers and technical project managers because it helps developers precisely to keep track of their developments, their deployments, all their new features, their bugs and such. So it has a lot of uh, features and tools more related to technical projects and to agile projects. Well, Jira Work Management is more focused to business groups, like for example an HR department or an operations department that needs to keep track of their tasks. So maybe they need a board will to write down all their tasks or their to-do lists. So that's essentially it. Let's say that Jira software is a bit more advanced and it has a few more features. But Jira Work Management also works pretty well for most people. So let's get started then with Jira Work Management. Now, the URL for this is the same. You will need to have an Atlassian account and an Atlassian organization and all that, but we will let that to your systems administrator. In this case, we can see that this is our domain. And up here to the left, it says Jira Software. Now, this can be a bit confusing because I have a license for both Jira Software and Jira Work Management, but they both systems operate under this same website. So the first thing I want to talk about is how tasks are in a way distributed, how they are created, and what's the hierarchy that exists. Jira is a very agile focused system, so you will see a lot of agile and mostly scrum related words and topics and tools. For example, the hierarchy for tasks. So every time we want to create a new item in Jira, we will get into it later. Um, you have the first level, which is epics, followed by tasks or user stories or bugs, and then there is another layer to the hierarchy, another level, which is subtasks, which come after user stories, tasks, or bugs. With this said, let's get let's get into the project section. Let's create a project. I'm gonna select Jira Work Management and we will see a series of templates that we can choose from. Now keep in mind that no matter which template you select, the projects are all the same. The only thing that changes is the configurations. That like these are templates precisely. Now that doesn't mean that you cannot enable certain features that have been disabled in this template, or it doesn't mean that you can't disable features that you don't want. So let's go into a blank project and you'll see what I mean. So let's say that we want to name this project Jira here, just Drive, and this is going to be work management. That's the name of let's go Jira Work Management because that's the tool we're using. We can see this is the template we selected, and we can see that we have a few more options. For example, the project type can be team managed or company managed. Now, essentially, what this means is team managed projects are very flexible, very dynamic. It allows whoever is creating the project to change a lot of settings. Now, that compared to company managed, which are projects that are meant for bigger scale projects or projects that are related to other projects within the organization and that they need to follow some certain standards and such. Um, yeah, you can start to see how it gets more complex and why it's only allowed for administrators because some changes affect the entire organization, so it affects everyone working in Jira. So we will stick to team managed projects since those are the ones that you will use the most. Then we have the key, which is a prefix that Jira will use for every item that we create within our project. So you can see, for example, here in this image, we can see a list of tasks, and this is how they will look. JJLWM1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, I don't particularly like that too much, so let's say that we're going to go with just work management. So WM1, 2, 3. Keep in mind that this key is unique to this project and no other projects can have this key. Then we can invite people to the project and we can define a role. In this case, I'm using a free plan from Jira, so I don't have access to that feature, but it allows you to prevent people from making changes in the project or from reading any information. So it can be completely private. It's going to be up to you to decide which roles you want to give people and what's going to be the privacy or the access settings of this project. With that said, let's click create. All right, there we go. So this is our first project. You can see here, this is the title of the project we've chosen, and to the left, this is a feature that's only available in Jira Work Management, by the way. We can have a list of our recent projects, and we can also start them up there. We can also change the color of the background if we wish. We can go with lighter colors or darker. I'm going to leave this for now how it is. Yeah, we can see that we have a bunch of options up here that we can choose from. So the first one would be summary, and this is actually pretty nice once you populated your project, because once you have a lot of tasks in and people start working on them, you will start seeing these graphs and these metrics change. Same with the recent activities. So all this stuff will start to move around, and it should give you some, it should give you insights on how your project is doing and how well things are, basically. Very well, that's quite simple. Let's go to board once again. So this is our Kanban board. This is where most of the magic will happen. In this Kanban board, we will have different cards. Now, here in Jira, we call these cards or tasks, we call them issues. So if we click create here, or if we click here, you'll see that it says create an issue. So even though this might not be issues per se, that's how they name them. And in this board, we can do a few things. We can create more columns. Let's say, for example, that this is pending / blocked. Very well. And there we go. We can see that now we have it between in progress and done, and we can move it around if we wanted to change the order. We can also, make it look like shrink it if we have a lot of tasks and we're not really interested in that. So that's fairly simple, and we can click here to rename it. It's not really going to affect too much. We can also create some filters. You can make some custom filters, or you can filter based on this quick filters already defined. And if you go to more, you can customize cards. You can add or remove certain information from the cards, which you will later see how they look like. You can also expand and collapse the columns. Then if we go to the list, we will this will act as a to-do list, but that also has some sort of hierarchy. For example, let's say we want to create a task, right? So let's say that we call this task number 1. Great. So you can see that I can create a subtask right here. We can call this subtask 1, and it should show under this, right? So we can have a main task, which might be, for example, develop the homepage of a website, or let's make something a bit more like onboard a certain employee. And then you have a series of subtasks, which might be create their email address and send the onboarding email, right? So that's basically how it would work. So the task would be the name of the employee, and the subtasks would be the actual tasks. So that's one way of doing it. This is quite versatile. You get to choose what you write and how you want to organize your project. That's basically how Jira works. It's very customizable. And then if we go here and click on this drop down, you can see it says manage types. If we go back to the beginning of this video where I explained that Jira is a very agile tool, I mentioned that you can have epics and user stories and other types of issues to choose from. So we will get into this later, but for now, let's just keep looking at this list. We can click on the issues. By the way, remember that it says WM1. That is the key or prefix that we chose for our project, which is also present here in the URL. So we click on this task and we get some information about this. You might find this quite similar to Trello if you have worked with that. And in this task, we have a few fields. We can have the assignee, yes, or the reporter, which is basically whoever is in charge of making sure this gets done, priority, labels, due dates, plenty of things that we can add if we want to, or that we can remove if we don't need it to. And then we can see a list of child issues, which is great. We can create more child issues from here, task number 2, or we can create them up here too. Same thing. You can also link issues, but we will get back to this later. And we can write down a description. So to do task 1. So ideally here you want to have a description of what the task is about, maybe some guidelines, some requirements. Basically, it's mostly informative. And then we have a comment section, which is where people can communicate with each other. So if there is a requirement for this task, something that has to be met, we can tag people. In this case, I'm going to have to tag myself and ask to get something done. So this person will now get an email and a notification with this message, so they know that someone has pinged them and that you need something from them. All right, we can also watch tasks. This means that you will get notified every time there's a change. You can like them, of course, or vote them. If it's doing good or not. Maybe you can use this system for choosing features, for example. The most voted features from our team are the ones that are going to get that first, maybe. You can share it, of course, share in Slack and share the issue via email. Then you have a few other options like moving, cloning, deleting. Yeah, very basic features. All right. So we can also see that the subtask number 2 is also displayed here, even though I created it from inside here. That is because everything is connected. So if I go back to the board, I will also see my task number 1. And we can also see that there's a new tab here that has shown up. Now we can group tasks by, in this case, their status. So if they are, for example, to do in progress and such, but we can also filter them or group them, sorry, by assignee or priority. So what this will do it will change the columns. So instead of statuses, we can see different things. Great. So that's pretty much it. It's fairly simple. We have a few items here we can create. We can assign due dates. People is gonna assign myself. We can create categories too, for example, tasks. I call this tasks. It's a bit redundant, but it's like labels in a way. Not really. It's categories because then you can filter by category, but you can add also labels if you wish. We can also filter here, we can also group here, and we can also show done items. So if you notice that tasks are starting to disappear from your to-do list, that is because you have not enabled the show done items. Very important. And one last thing, if you click on the people that might show up here, you can filter by assignee. So basically, if there are several people showing up, you can click on the profile picture and you can see only their tasks. Great. So let's keep going. Calendar. Now, the calendar will display start and due dates. So let's go back to my list and let's say that this task has a due date of the 31st. And let's say that the start date is today. Hopefully, if everything went well, we should be able to see exactly the task here. So as you can see, for project management, this might be a bit confusing. We might want to use something like a Gantt chart, which we'll look into later. But for business teams, this might work well because it could work like a shared calendar if we have different things going on. Once again, it's very simple. We can also schedule things through this unscheduled menu. We can filter once again, and we can show done items, change the start week. Uh, it's a calendar. Going to timeline. Now this is where things get a bit more interesting. This is what we call a Gantt chart. If you're not familiarized with it, in a way it looks a bit like a waterfall. So we can see how this starts up here. And if we create a task number 2, and this task has to come after the first task, we can place it there or there if you want to start on the same day. We go to task number 3, so on and so forth. So in a way, it looks like it's constantly going down because that's how the progress is going. And well, we can do the same for subtasks, of course, if we know that this is going to take half of that time and then this is going to take this much time, we can do the same. This should help have a better overview of ideally what the timeline will be for this project. And we can also filter by people up here. Yes, we're going to get into that in a moment. We can also share, export. This is actually a nice feature because you can export as a picture, I believe, or a PDF, which is quite useful actually. We can show the done items and filter once more. And there is something quite interesting about this, and that is if we hover our mouse on top of the, let's say that we have defined a set of dates for this task, and we hover our mouse on top of it, we will see that these 2 bubbles will show up here, and down here. So this is quite useful because if you click and drop, grab and drop, you can do that, and all of a sudden you have a dependency. What this means is that this task has to come first, and until this task is not finished, you cannot start with this task. So let's say that I try to start working on this task one day earlier. This will show up in red because, well, my dependency has been created and these tasks are overlapping. I cannot start working on this task before this task has been finished. Now that's a bit of a weird example, but let's try to do the following. Let's say that this first task has been delayed by 1 day. So I'm going to do that plus 1 day. All of a sudden, my second task is showing up in red now because, well, there is some overlap. So I will need to change the start date. But if I only change the start date, we can see that we will have 1 less day to do this. So our time estimation will be wrong. So instead of doing that, what you will have to do is to click in the middle of the task and move it 1 day in the future. Now all of a sudden your third task will also be delayed. And thanks to these red lines, you will easily identify these overlaps and hopefully correct them. So we will have to delay the task. And now instead of finishing the 12th of April, we're going to be finishing the 13th because this task got delayed by 1 day. You can do the same with subtasks. You can link them, and you can also link subtasks with tasks. This might be useful in certain scenarios, so keep that in mind. And that's about it, really, when it comes to timeline. Quite simple. Now let's go to forms. Forms are a new concept that Jira has implemented and that, well, to be honest, I think they're pretty nice because it allows us to create a form with some fields that we want people to fill in. And then this will automatically create a Jira issue for us. So let's say, for example, that we want to use this Jira project with an HR team. So we want to send this form to the supervisors of the company, to the managers, and every time they have someone they need to onboard, they have to fill in this form. So what we will do is we will write up here. You can see that we have some pre-populated or pre-selected fields. These are the fields of the tasks you can see here. These are the tasks. So every time someone fills in this form, they will create a new task. And people will be able to write the summary of the task. The summary would be the title, basically. So in this case, we want them to write the name of employee. So they will write down the name of the employee. Then they can write descriptions, like say, for example, comments. If they have any comments, we can ask them to attach a picture of the, well, not pictures, yeah, documents, the contract, say the signed contract, because let's say we need that information. And let's put a due date here, which is the onboard date. Very good. Let's put this up here. We can order it a bit. Very well. Okay, we can also hide fields if we want to, but I think this is pretty good. So once we have done this, we can go to preview and we can see the form. So in this case, let's say that I'm gonna onboard myself. We need to define the date, so I need to be onboarded the 31st. I don't have a signed contract quite yet, and I can write that down in the comments. Submit. Very well. If we go back to the project now, and we go back to the list, we will now see that there is a new task with my name being the summary and the due date being the 31st of March. It has a label which says business forms, of course, and if we click in here, the description says no signed contract yet, which is the information we just submitted through the form. So this can be quite useful if you need to collect requirements or tasks or any kind of information from external people that should not have access to manage the project, but just fill in this data. Keep in mind that whoever is filling in this needs to have a Jira account. Very important. All right, let's keep going. Pages. Now, Jira offers a service, or actually Atlassian offers a service called Confluence, which does not come included with Jira. Confluence is, in a way, a word processing service. It's like Word, Microsoft Word, or Google Docs. It's a cloud service where you can have a lot of text files with images and such. It can be quite useful, but that's not part of the scope of this tutorial. So we'll leave that there for now. Then we can see a list of our issues. This is in a way similar to our list here, but it gives us a few more options on how to filter, and we can also see uh, the description and the information of each and every issue that we have created. So it's a bit easier. We can filter by more things here, so you have the level of granularity here is pretty nice. You have the list view, and then we have the detailed view, super important. Then we have reports, which might become handy. Um, there are plenty of reports, and I encourage you to take a look at each of them. We're not going to go through them because you need to have already data and tasks and some activity in the project in order for these reports to work. Then we have shortcuts, and this is actually quite useful if you want to, say, add a guide to a certain process. Maybe you're storing this in uh, Google Drive, so or Box, for example. So you're storing it in Box. So process. By the way, you can also add an emoji here. Uh, there we go, process, add. And if we go back to the board, sorry, there we go. We have our process with our nice icon. And now if we click on it, it's going to take us to box.com. So that's pretty cool. We have some shortcuts here. And last but not least, we have the project settings, which is where we can change the icon and the name of the project, who's the lead, we can add categories and the default assignee. We can also manage the access here. So this is where we can let people in or not. Notifications, this is for the emails that we will receive. If something happens, we will receive an email. Now, automation is actually a very powerful tool in Jira, but that's another thing that's out of scope for this tutorial. We will cover this in an advanced tutorial. Then we have issue types, and we're going back to what I mentioned about epics, bugs, and stories. We can add these issue types so that we can have a different hierarchy if we wish. We can add user stories, for example. This is a bit more agile, so it might be a bit confusing for business teams, but depending on what your needs are, you might find this quite useful. And here you can also edit a bit the fields. You can drag and drop fields that you might find useful. So you can customize this a lot. You can also edit the workflow, which is essentially what's the workflow that the task has to go through. Um, but once again, we will not cover this in this tutorial because this is quite an advanced feature. All right, let's go back to project settings. Then we have apps. This is mostly for plugins and apps that you can add from up here, but you need to be an administrator to do that, so we will not cover this. And we have Slack integration, which is another feature that is a bit advanced, so we will cover it in a later video. It's good for you to know that you have all these features and options, and you should definitely go in there and play around with the settings and things that you have available to see what works and what doesn't. But that's about it, really. At least, that's everything that Jira Work Management offers right now. We are in March of 2023, and they keep adding features constantly. So yeah, if you get any emails about new features and such, you should probably go through them to see what new things you can do. And I really hope that you found this useful. Let me know in the comments if there's something that I missed or that you did not understand. So with your feedback, we can improve our videos. And this is our first tutorial. So I really hope that you enjoyed it and you found it useful. So have a great day. Goodbye.